Yo, welcome back to the MMA Fight Realm. It is your boy Chris. Thanks for tuning in if you are new, and I'm back with another picks and predictions video, this time for UFC Paris. Renato Moicano taking on Benoit Saint Denis in the main event. Hope you guys like, comment, subscribe. Let me know what you guys think of these picks in the comments, and let me know your picks in the comments as well, man. Let's break it down. Leading off the card, we got Bolaji Oki taking on Chris Duncan. Now, Oki is just one fight into his UFC career, and this guy, he's definitely built for this level of competition. 6 out of his 9 wins are by finish. Only took him a little over 2 minutes to find a liver shot that earned him a first round finish and a contract on his Contender Series debut. Clearly showed that he's a great striker with very good distance management. He's coming out of his fights with barely a scratch on him, and that's because of his defense, man. This guy only 2.53 strikes absorbed per minute while delivering 5.18 per minute. His output is great. I think he's due for some improvement in the grappling. We saw him lose minutes in the control time and on the ground to Timmy Kawamba in his UFC debut, which Kawamba took on short notice. So, definitely something to highlight there. But he defended 5 out of 6 attempts overall. He put a stamp on the fight in the 3rd round by, just forward pressure the entire time, making it much harder for Kawamba to get the takedowns off the back foot. And he outstruck Kawamba 60-33 overall. I think if Oki is going to get a win here, he's going to have to replicate a lot of the same in this fight against Chris Duncan. Duncan certainly has more experience. He's 2-1 in the UFC, 11-2 overall, so he's got some more fights. Only loss was to Manuel Torres, and it was the grappling that failed him in that fight, which was a big surprise for me considering the wrestling and grappling background of Duncan. It's supposed to be his strong suit, and Torres was just able to outmuscle him, and it was just an outclass beating in the grappling exchanges for Manuel Torres against Chris Duncan. And didn't take too long for Manuel Torres to find the back and lock in the rear naked choke. First round finish for Manuel Torres over Chris Duncan in that fight. It was a big letdown performance for Chris Duncan. And in his debut against Oumar Morales, he got clipped bad in the first round. Didn't have much success with the takedowns until later in the fight where Morales was starting to tire out. Duncan showed good cardio there, but defensively, it's clear he can be hit. And now I'm starting to question his strong suit. So you gotta, these performances are not measuring up to how good Chris Duncan is set out to be. He's an American top team star, but I just think he's beatable, man. And I think Oki versus Duncan is a striker versus grappler matchup. For Oki, he's in a great position to prove he's a name to remember, while Duncan is in a show me spot. Duncan has to show he can get it done against someone who will test him on the feet and is looking to keep this standing. And I do think if Oki has the physicality, he has the skill, Oki will have a slight reach advantage, and he's got the size. So I don't think Duncan will be able to just outmuscle him in the grappling, which makes this a much tougher fight for Chris Duncan here. I'm picking Bolaji Oki to get it done. I think he's aware of what's coming, and he's going to, formulate the right game plan to avoid losing rounds against Chris Duncan in the control time and in the takedowns. Just continue with his forward pressure, same game plan that he had in his last one. And I think Oki gets this one done either by knockout or by decision. So there you guys have it, leading off the card. Next up, we got Jacqueline Cavalcanti taking on Nora Cornolle. Now, Cavalcanti stepping in on short notice after fighting just a month ago against Josiane Nunes, where she didn't look like she took so much damage, but it was a letdown in terms of performance. I thought she did get the win there, but she didn't show she was levels above Josiane Nunes, and that was a huge concern for me considering the advantages she had in that fight with the height and reach. I wish she would have hunted for the finish more and made it clear she was the better fighter, but it was a split decision win for Cavalcanti in just her second fight in the UFC. So, she still got a lot to prove. But, even in her debut, she fought Zara Fairn. And again, it was just a decent decision win over an opponent. She was 13 years younger then. And I just felt that she could have finished it. If you're betting, if you're a betting fan, I think you're going to always have to bet cautiously with Cavalcanti, and it's because when you leave it to the judges, you never know what result you're going to get. And for example, I thought she won the fight against Josiane Nunes unanimously, but a judge gave Josiane Nunes every round in that fight and scored it 30-27 for Josiane Nunes. Not how I saw it, clearly, but it is what it is. This is what happens when you leave it in their hands. And it just goes to show sometimes these judges are watching for different things, and that can sway how they score the round. So for me, it's clear Cavalcanti is looking to be a decision merchant, and she's going up against a finisher in Nora Cornolle, 8-1 with 7 finishes, 6 by knockout and 1 by submission. So, just off the bat, I think Nora clearly has got the more finishing potential here. And this can't go without saying, these two have actually fought before. So Nora Cornolle's pro MMA debut was against Cavalcanti, and she lost that one by decision. No surprise there, but that was back in 2021. I did watch some clips of the fight. I wasn't able to watch the entire fight from start to finish, but both girls had moments. Both girls were rocked, and it was Cavalcanti's reach that was causing a lot of problems for Cornolle there. And Cornolle was too accepting of being on the back foot, in my opinion. Something that she has made improvements on, but we really can't say for sure, because her 2 fights in the UFC, Jocelyn Edwards and Melissa Mullins, both girls have just tried to take her down. Both girls have exposed her ground game, and Melissa Mullins didn't really get the chance to. Clearly, she got her down. Nora Cornolle was able to find her way back up and find the liver with the knee. But Jocelyn Edwards did not entertain much of the striking exchanges. Neither did Melissa Mullins. Jacqueline Cavalcanti is a striker. Jacqueline Cavalcanti will try to keep this one standing, and she might shoot for some takedowns, but it's just to score. It's really not, I don't think it's really to get any control time or anything like that. I think Cavalcanti will look to keep this one standing, actually. And that's just something that Nora Cornolle has not faced in the UFC so far. So for me, I think if Nora Cornolle, it's Nora Cornolle if the fight ends in a finish, and it's Cavalcanti if it goes to the scorecards. Cavalcanti also just turned 27, while Cornolle is knocking on the door to 35. So a bit of an age gap here. I think Cavalcanti is going to try and replicate the same success that she had in the first matchup with Nora Cornolle, with her reach and counters. And Cornolle is going to have to make it a dirty fight by, being the aggressor. It's going to be a close fight, and I could see even a split decision here. But I think Cavalcanti gets this one done, man. I know Cornolle is going into this with a bit of momentum, 2-0 to start her UFC career. She's at home, but I think she's up against a girl who is going to be willing to strike with her and come forward no matter the danger. So give me Cavalcanti in this one. I think she's got the reach to just, disrupt Nora Cornolle while she is trying to be the aggressor. And I think Cavalcanti gets this one done by decision. Next up, we got Victor Altamirano taking on Daniel Barez. Flyweights both in a must-win situation. I think this is going to be a great fight, and my initial lean is going to be Daniel Barez. I just haven't been impressed with Victor Altamirano at all lately. The guy has very basic striking, and he's looking to get his opponents to the ground for the most part, but not having much success when it comes to finishing fights. With this style of laying on his opponents, while not delivering damage, is always going to force judges to have to think about who they want to give the round to. And it was evident in his last one against Felipe dos Santos. He got 9 takedowns out of 11 attempts, slightly over 5 minutes of control time. But the judges, they leaned damage that night, and they gave dos Santos the win. Only fighter Altamirano was able to finish was Daniel Lacerda, and shockingly, he didn't attempt a takedown in that fight, which was surprising to me. But he did get dropped within the first minute of the fight, but he found the moment, landed a clean shot to the body, and dropped Lacerda. And Altamirano made it a mission, to never let him back up after he dropped him. One thing I will give credit to Altamirano is his durability. He can take a punch. He's got the understanding that sometimes you got to dig deep. He is going to be there for 15 minutes. And if you can't put him out, he is finishing guys like Lacerda. But, Daniel Lacerda has been finished in all of his losses in the UFC. Can't really give much credit there. So I do think, he's got some potential to make this a close fight if it goes to the scorecards. But Barez is a black belt with 7 wins by knockout, 6 by submission. In my opinion, man, Barez is the much more complete fighter, but he just hasn't shown it against UFC caliber competition. He fought Jafel Filho. It was on short notice in his debut. And, in the early minutes, he was making it look like he was levels above Jafel Filho. He dropped him several times, defended the takedowns in space, and he showed really good ability to mix combinations to the body. Fialho was able to bite on the mouthpiece and fire back some strikes of his own, and it forced Barez on the back foot and near the cage, and that's where Fialho then made quick work of Daniel Barez. It only took 1 takedown for him to mount and find the arm triangle. That does worry me a bit going into this matchup with Altamirano, considering Altamirano's ground game, but I rate Fialho's ground game much better. I rate Fialho's ability to find the finish much better, and I just think Altamirano overall, his game plan is not as complex to prepare for. So, also Daniel Barez took it on short notice. Now he's getting a full camp. Barez took a year layoff. I'm assuming he's been improving, and I think he's got a good chance here to get a bounce back win. At this point, everyone fighting Altamirano has got to be aware he's going to look to take it to the ground, and I think him being this predictable is going to cost him in this matchup. He can prove me wrong. I'm not counting him out. You can approach this with a always bet on cardio mindset, and that's what you can count on from Altamirano. But I just think Barez is a bit more complete, and he will be ready to defend those takedowns. Daniel Barez is going to be the pick for me in this fight, and I think he gets it done either by knockout or by decision. Next up, we got Taylor Lapilus taking on Vince Morales. Morales stepping up on short notice for this one after going 5-0 on the regional scene and proving he is deserving of a second chance in the UFC. Back when he was in the UFC, he lost some tough competition, man. Song Yadong, Miles Johns, Jonathan Martinez, and Chris Gutierrez. We're talking about, guys who are in the top 15, in the top 10. And, Gutierrez was the only one able to finish Vince Morales, finished him with leg kicks. And for the rest of the guys, it was by decision. So we have seen him find a way to grind it out, wear some damage, but offensively, what cost him is his low output. Vince Morales, he's got a negative strike ratio, and he's gone to decision with sometimes only landing 39 strikes. Most he's ever landed over the course of 3 rounds is 76 strikes. And, these aren't numbers that demonstrate a fighter who is going to get it done by decision, which is why I'm not so surprised he's on the wrong end of these decision losses in his time in the UFC. What he's done in the regional scene to make a resurgence is he's getting finishes. 3 out of his last 5 fights, he's gone out there, gotten a finish, but it's the regional scene. So, he's gone from some of the top names in bantamweight to all the way back to the regional scene. And, this will be a true test for him against a guy who He's not a top name, but he's definitely levels better than the regional scene. Lapilus, another fighter who got a second chance in the UFC, and he's making good of it. You know, he's won 2 out of his 3 fights, only loss being to currently undefeated Farid Basharat. And in that loss to Basharat, he defended 11 out of 16 takedowns, avoided the submissions, but he got controlled for 7 minutes, which is about half the fight. So we have seen some holes in the ground game of Taylor Lapilus, but you got to get him down, and that is proven to be a problem. And 78% takedown defense in his last one against Cody Stamann, a true wrestler. He defended 5 out of 6 takedowns, was able to use great footwork and a huge reach advantage that he had in that fight, which he made good use of, man. He outstruck Stamann 100-59. It was a great performance overall, and I thought he also did a great job of barely taking any damage. You know, Stamann was 41% on his significant strike percentage, and you know, Taylor Lapilus, he's got a great positive striking differential. I think Morales is good and deserving of a second chance in his in the UFC, but Lapilus in his backyard with much more time to prepare is definitely the side, in my opinion, man. Morales is game, he's got the power, but Lapilus will have the reach advantage here, and he's done a great job of being able to stay out of any danger. So, you know, Lapilus, he's never been dropped, he's never been finished, but he is not a finisher. So, you know, he's avoided the power shots and takedowns, and he's keeping the fight at his distance. I think that should be enough to get the job done here, but, you know, you can't rule out Vince Morales. I do think Lapilus earns himself another decision win here in this spot. I think if Morales gets this one done, it will probably be inside the distance, but no one's yet to do it to Taylor Lapilus, and I don't think Morales will get it done on short notice. So I'm going Taylor Lapilus here, and I'm picking him by decision. Next up, we got Ailin Pérez taking on Darya Zhelezniakova. Interesting matchup here. You know, I felt Ailin was due for maybe a step up in competition, but she finds herself here in a fight against 1-0 in the UFC, Darya Zhelezniakova. I did pick Zhelezniakova to get it done against Montserrat Rendon, but, you know, I was far from impressed with her performance in that fight. You know, she dropped a round, she got taken down and controlled. She got taken down 3 times and controlled for over 5 minutes in that fight. And, you know, I had initially thought she could finish a girl like Montserrat Rendon, but she took it to a decision with a girl who is much less athletic, much slower than Ailin Pérez. You know, Montserrat Rendon is 34, 35. I think Ailin Pérez is much more physical, and Darya's only loss is back in the regional scene to Melissa Mullins, where the ground game got exposed. You know, she got taken down and finished in the first round. I think the weakness of Darya is clear. If you can get her down, you should be able to win the fight. And the question for me is, can Ailin Pérez take her down? And that's the easy answer, man. It's absolutely. I think she is going to have success, and I wouldn't be surprised if Pérez gets her first finish here in the UFC. You know, she's showing improvement every time she's out there, and this is a matchup where she knows her advantages as well as the dangers. If she can't get the takedowns, I wouldn't be surprised if we see her controlling Darya near the cage to work some control time. I think Ailin is just going to be heavy on the grappling game plan here. I don't know if Darya is going to be dangerous enough on the feet, considering she couldn't finish Rendon with her striking. So I have to lean with the sizable wrestling advantage here, and that is Ailin Pérez. She's been doing great work with her grappling. Pretty much all of her fights, she's gotten them to the ground, all of her wins, and I think she gets another one here with either by ground and pound or by decision with her wrestling, man. So I'm picking Ailin Pérez there. Next up, we got Roosevelt Roberts taking on Ludovit Klein. Another fight on this card where, you know, like I mentioned earlier with Daniel Barez and Altamirano, I have an initial lean on this fight, and it's Ludovit Klein. You know, there's some stats that stand out here. Roberts is 6'2", Klein is only 5'7", so he's given up a lot of height. But this is nothing Klein hasn't already dealt with in his career. He's fought Ignacio Bahamondes, who's 6'3", and in that fight he showed a great ability to get inside and, you know, land some shots while also being able to, you know, present himself as a takedown threat. He worked 3 takedowns in that fight, racked up 6 minutes of control time over a guy who's 6'3". This is very hard to do. These guys are lengthy, they have long reach, and, you know, Klein was able to control him, man. I just think Klein, he is going to be better in all areas of this fight, really. And this is all without even mentioning Robert is taking this fight on 2 weeks notice, and, you know, Klein will also be much more prepared. I think the initial lean is Klein, and for Robert, he's in a show me spot, much like Chris Duncan. You know, he hasn't fought anyone on the regional scene since he was released from the UFC after that first round loss to Mateusz Rebecki, and before that it was a split decision loss to Austin Hubbard on the Ultimate Fighter finale. First round loss to Jim Miller. I don't think he's shown he can hang with a guy like Klein, man, and I think this will be Ludovit Klein's opportunity to, you know, stand out once again, and I'm picking him here to get a finish either in round 1 or round 2, man. I think Klein has all the tools to get this one done early, and I don't see this fight going over 2.5 rounds. Next up, we got Oumar Sy taking on Woon Jung. Sy is the undefeated prospect coming out of France, was able to get a first round rear naked choke finish in his UFC debut, and he looked comfortable in his debut despite only being 10-0. He didn't really show much jitters, got the fight where he wanted it, which is to the ground. He just wore on his opponent until he got the back, man. Secured himself with a body triangle and synced in the choke. It was a very impressive debut for him, and he didn't have to show his stand-up, which is where I think there's potential. He's got some holes, but, you know, 10-0, 8 by finish, 4 by knockout, 4 by submission. It's clear the guy is well-rounded, and he's got the tools to be in the UFC. And I think he's being given an opportunity to showcase himself in front of his hometown against a guy who's been in a losing streak in Woon Jung. Woon Jung is 15-5-1, only 30 years old, so he's got a decent amount of experience for his youth, but the losses are adding up and they're not aging well. You know, against Devin Clark, he gave up a takedown every round. He didn't win the striking exchanges either, in my opinion. I thought it was a clear 30-27 win for Devin Clark, and that's a guy who is 2-3 in his last 5. And then against Dustin Jacoby, it was a first round knockout loss for Woon Jung, where, you know, he didn't present much adversity at all, and I thought it was a big letdown of a performance against a guy in Jacoby who was ranked number 15 at the time. And then Ohlberg did a number on him in his last one before putting him away in the third. So looking at this fight, I see a guy who's gotten the experience, but we aren't seeing much improvement from one fight to the next, against a guy who has a lot of potential. He's undefeated and he's in his hometown. So I think this is a great chance for us to see the next up-and-comer at light heavyweight, Oumar Sy, and how he deals with a guy who has decent takedown defense. He's been a bit battle-tested. So, you know, Oumar Sy definitely has a challenge here, but I think he's going to get it done, man. I think he can get this fight to the ground where he's comfortable and work a finish here. I'm picking Oumar Sy, and I think he gets it done in rounds 2 or 3. Next up, man, we got Ivan Erslan taking on Ion Cutelaba. Cutelaba has only 1 win in his last 5 fights, and now he finds himself against a guy making his debut in the UFC. And Cutelaba is a guy who is fun to watch because He's got a kill or be killed style for the most part, but he's never had the decent enough cardio to deliver that from rounds 1 all the way to rounds 3. So I am very skeptical about Cutelaba as of right now, and I just think after all the experience gained, he should be a much better fighter than what he shows us. But time and time again, he goes out there and he has these same weaknesses. So, he's too hittable. He's not great with the cardio. And now he's up against a guy who won't be intimidated by Cutelaba's power in Ivan Erslan. Erslan almost turning 33 into his debut in the UFC. That's always an alarming sign because, one can say he's probably taken a longer time to make it because he's had some setbacks. And he's definitely had some setbacks. Actually, he's lost two of his only 3 losses on his pro record have happened in his last 5 fights. So, one was a 5-round decision loss to a Turkish fighter who is currently on a 10-fight win streak. And the guy just did a great job of giving Erslan different looks and interrupting Ivan's rhythm the entire time. Ivan also didn't really show much ground game in that fight. I thought he could have maybe tried to take the fight to the ground because it wasn't going his way in the striking, but he didn't really show that. I thought, the guy had Ivan hurt multiple times, but Ivan was never out of the fight, and he made it all the way to the scorecards. That impressed me. He showed some grit. He showed some durability. He showed he can fight 5 rounds. I was impressed with Ivan's cardio in that one. I thought it was a decent paced fight from start to finish. And, that alone, I just think if he can go 5 rounds, that automatically shows me he's got the cardio advantage, in my opinion. I don't think Cutelaba's style is built for 5 rounds. And we've seen Cutelaba gassed out at, the second half of round 2. So, I do think Erslan does have the cardio advantage here. But to highlight some weaknesses, man, I did think Erslan was being very wild in terms of his offense. There's not really much setups before the power shots, and that made him very readable. The guy has had success with this method more often than not. He's got 10 first-round knockouts out of his 14 wins total. So having no caution and just forward pressure, it's working out for him. He's found success. I don't know if that is going to translate well in the UFC, but against Ion Cutelaba, it definitely has the potential. Cutelaba is not a guy who is comfortable being the nail, and if Ivan can force him on the back foot, it'll be a good look for the judges, as well as his game plan, which seems to be to hunt for a knockout. Can Ivan take advantage of this opportunity in the UFC against probably one of the weaker competition in the UFC light heavyweight division? Or does he fold, man, and end up getting knocked out himself by Ion Cutelaba? It's definitely a possibility. I think this fight has the potential to be close. And, for that reason, I have to side with the underdog, and that's currently Ivan Erslan right now, man. He's training with the American top team. He has the knockout power to take Cutelaba out. We've seen fighters like this who do end up showing their full skill set in their debuts, and Ivan could fall victim to that here, but I think he is the pick for me. I think Ion just has been a letdown. Cutelaba, he's been a letdown time and time again, and I think the UFC would want Erslan to win here, but that doesn't really influence my pick much. It's just something to explain to you guys. I think my pick stands Ivan Erslan by knockout or by decision in this fight, man. Next up, we got Matt Frevola taking on Perez Ziam. Now, this should be a great fight. Frevola is all gas, no brakes. He's going to look to bring the pressure, while Ziam is just trying to stay safe, keep the fight at his distance so that he can point fight his way to a decision. All 5 of Ziam wins are by decision, and that says it all for me. This guy is just not dangerous. He's not looking to engage in the pocket, and overall, I'm not a fan of this guy's style. Most punches he's landed in his time in the UFC over the course of 3 rounds is 61. He's got an extremely low output, and what's been his biggest weakness as of late is his takedown defense. Terrence McKinney was able to get Ziam down 3 times in the first round, exposed the ground game by working a rear naked choke finish in the first round. And even in his last one against Claudio Puelles, he got taken down 7 times and controlled for 7 minutes. It was a very close split decision win for Perez Ziam there. He didn't really show much improvement in the takedown defense. I think the holes in Perez Ziam are still there. And Frevola is a guy who is well-rounded enough to get this fight to the ground. Frevola has only been out-controlled by Arman Tsarukyan, who is, now potentially fighting for the title next. So nothing to be upset about there. Besides that, he's been able to showcase his grappling against guys like Jalen Turner. He's also got the ability to put your lights out, man. Prior to the loss to Benoit Saint Denis, Frevola was on a 3-fight finishing streak. All came in the first round. Frevola has fought the tougher competition by far, which in return has made him a better fighter. And it's not always going to go his way, when you're kill or be killed. And I think Frevola has accepted that. That's pretty much what happened in that fight with Benoit Saint Denis. I thought he was doing pretty well up until he wasn't. He got caught with that head kick. And, I just think Benoit Saint Denis presents a lot more dangers than Perez Ziam. In this matchup, he's not going up against a guy who is as much of a finishing threat. If Frevola can bite on the mouthpiece, he's willing to take some shots to deliver some of his own, I can see Ziam being very uncomfortable with that style of fight. Ziam, he wants space. He does his best to avoid fights within distance. I think Frevola will just accept wherever the fight takes him, and I think that's what's going to benefit him in this spot. I'm picking Frevola here to get this one done. I think he gets it done by finish. I think Ziam will fold under pressure, and Frevola's power, Frevola's grappling, it should earn him a finish in this fight. It's hard to say the method because Frevola has the tools to get it done by knockout or by submission, but I do favor this fight ending in submission, maybe by a club and sub, or maybe by Frevola working the fight to the ground. Like I said, he's got the advantages there. So give me Matt Frevola here by submission. Next up, we got Morgan Charriere taking on Gabriel Miranda. Morgan is back after a close, controversial split decision loss to Chepe Mariscal. I was on the Chepe side, but Chepe is a savage. Chepe is, he's extremely tough. He's proven that for anyone. I do expect Morgan to gain experience from that fight, and he will improve from that fight. I think the takedown defense was great. He defended 7 out of 8 takedowns, but he did give up almost 4 minutes of control time. So that's something to note there, since he's going up against a guy in Gabriel Miranda who is 17-6 with 16 wins by submission, and the other one by knockout. So a 100% finish rate for Gabriel Miranda, which is very impressive, but he's yet to really show it against UFC caliber competition. Gabriel was able to make quick work of Shane Young with a first round submission, but Shane Young, he has since been cut from the UFC. Not really an impressive win, not a win that can hold much weight. And then against Benoit Saint Denis, when Gabriel Miranda stepped in on short notice, which he is stepping in on short notice for this fight as well, Benoit Saint Denis was able to destroy Gabriel Miranda on the feet. And the striking defense was not good enough, and then on the ground he got out muscled by Benoit Saint Denis in those exchanges. So the striking defense is really what stood out to me the most, because it just was non-existent that night. And against a guy who's wild like Benoit Saint Denis, I think Gabriel Miranda, he just might be a step behind in the stand-up against Morgan, who shines in the stand-up. I think Morgan is a guy who will beat most guys that only have a one-dimensional or one game plan approach. And in this one, it's clear Gabriel is going to try to get this fight to the ground. And I think Morgan, he has been submitted, but that was back in the regional scene. I do think that he's improved a ton since. And so this just seems like, a bounce back opportunity here for Morgan Charriere. Miranda also taking this on short notice. Like I said, this is the last time we saw him on short notice. He had a huge cardio dump. It was very evident against Benoit Saint-Denis. And I do think if you are on the Gabriel Miranda side, maybe Gabriel Miranda round 1 or Gabriel Miranda by submission is the play. But for me, I think there's a lot of things working in favor here from Morgan Charriere, and I do think he takes advantage of that either by knockout or by a dominant decision. So give me Morgan Charriere to get this one done and earn himself a bounce back win in this opportunity, man. At home for Morgan Charriere as well. A lot of things working in his favor. Next up, we got Kevin Jousset taking on Bryan Battle. Another great fight in the welterweight division. Both fighters on win streaks, and shouldn't be any controversy with saying that, because I'm aware Bryan Battle's last fight was a no contest against Angelusa. But if you watch that fight, Bryan Battle was winning every minute. It was on pace. I think he was on pace to getting a finish. It ended in a no contest due to an eye poke, but I just think Angelusa found the opportunity to quit, and he took it. I thought Battle did a great job of showing some defensive improvements and overall just a better fighter from his past fights. He keeps improving. He keeps looking levels better than what he did in the past. His only loss in the UFC is to Renato Moicano, who just happens to be undefeated in the UFC so far. So, Renato, with his phenomenal grappling, has been a tough task for everyone. Overall, I've been impressed with Bryan Battle's growth from the Ultimate Fighter to now. I didn't have these big expectations out of him since I felt he was, too much of a brawler. He just looked like a brawler. He looked like he was accepting of wherever the fight took it, but not really much finishing potential. I just thought he was going to be playing jiu-jitsu too much when he got taken down. But he has definitely shown that he is, built for this. He's stepped up his game plans. He stepped up in his training. I think he's been through the tough opponents, and he's got another tough opponent here, man. Kevin Jousset, much like Bryan Battle, is constantly improving. He's currently on a 5-fight win streak, 2-0 in the UFC. Picked up a first-round finish in his debut against Kiefer Crosby, where, he showcased some judo. He does have the judo background. He was able to get the fight to the ground, find his way to the back, and secure a first-round submission in his debut. And then in his last one against Song Kenan, he just point fought his way to a decision while making Song miss a ton of strikes, which for me, it was definitely an improvement from the last one. Jousset, he had a tendency to come forward with his hands down and against Kiefer Crosby in his debut, and he got touched up a bit because of that, so I was definitely, on the lookout for how he was going to perform against Song Kenan, who does have the power to drop anyone. We saw him drop Ian Gary. So, Kevin Jousset did a great job of avoiding the power shots from Song Kenan. Overall, though, I am a lot more impressed with Bryan Battle and Bryan Battle's body of work, and I think he's come a long way since the Ultimate Fighter. He has the potential, in my opinion, to be a top 15 welterweight. And credit to Jousset, for his start to his UFC career. But Kiefer Crosby, Song Kenan, these are not wins that really hold much weight anymore. I think this is a step up in competition for Jousset. And, he does have a chance. But Bryan Battle, is the rightful favorite in this spot, and I do believe Bryan Battle gets this one done. Just constantly showing us that he's improving and he's got the right game plans in his fights, and I think he's going to come into this one understanding that he cannot just sit at range with a guy who is content to point fight. So I think Bryan Battle is going to be the aggressor in this one, and I think he gets this one done either by decision or even by a late finish. Next up, we got Joanderson Brito taking on William Gomis. This is a fun matchup because these two, from what they've shown us, very different styles. Brito has made it a mission to go out and get the finish. 17 wins, 15 by finish. He's got 7 by knockout, 8 by submission. This guy is extremely well-rounded. He's only seen the scorecards 3 times, and he's been able to win 2 out of 3 of them. So, he's been able to put away his last 5 opponents. And we've got some notable names like Jack Shore, Andre Feely, and, Jonathan Pierce. Maybe not as notable, but a tough opponent. And Weston Wilson, Lucas Alexander, they're not standouts, but Brito treated them as such, and he put them away in the first round. In his last one against Jack Shore, it was the leg kicks and constant pressure that caused the cut to the shin of Jack Shore and forced the doctor stoppage there. So, this guy, Joanderson Brito, he means business. And then you got William Gomis, who's 13 wins, 7 by finish, and 5 by decision. But what's been the trend lately for him, man, is these fights are going to the judges' scorecards. And that is because he does not mind a point fight at his distance. He was able to do that against Charno Aarons, and he even showed off some ground game. He took Aarons down a couple of times, but Aarons, his grappling has always been a bit questionable. Aarons actually just lost his last one to Yusuf Zalal due to the grappling as well. So, and then a split decision win for William Gomis over Francis Marshall, where Gomis did not have the better of the grappling exchanges, and it ended up being a very close fight. But it was one that I thought Gomis did just enough to get it done. But that's what Gomis is accustomed to, just doing enough to get it done. And, he's got the height, 6 foot. More than often than not, he's usually got the reach advantage, so he's able to keep fights at his range and just making sure that he's always scoring. Even if it isn't powerful, he's scoring. And the Paris crowd at home, it's on his side, so that might also have an impact as to how a judge will view William Gomis's offense. And I think what it comes down to in this fight is, will Brito be accepting of the distance? And I don't think Brito will. I think Brito will force himself inside. I think he's got the better grappling to take this fight to the ground. I think Brito has the power on the feet to force Gomis to make mistakes. And I think that's what's going to be the difference maker in this fight. I think Brito is comfortable wherever the fight goes. And for Gomis, it's clear he is trying to avoid getting hit at all costs. But eventually, he's gonna have nowhere to go in that cage, man. Brito will find that opportunity. I think Brito gets it done here inside the distance and racks up another finish, man. It's hard to predict the method, since I think he's got the power to get it done on the feet, but also the grappling to pull off a submission. So maybe under 2.5 is the play for this fight, or even a Brito double chance. You can't rule out William Gomis. If he's able to keep it at his range, he definitely will win this fight because he barely absorbs many strikes at distance. But I think for him to win this fight, he's got to earn the respect of Joanderson Brito, and Joanderson Brito is just straight up disrespectful. All right, he does not respect any of his opponents, and I think he's gonna come down there and show that in Paris. Give me Joanderson Brito to get this one done by knockout. Next up, we got the co-main event. Brendan Allen taking on Nassourdine Imavov. Brendan Allen, 12-2 in the UFC on an 8-fight winning streak. Only 28 years old. coming into this fight as a plus 180 underdog. All right. Very hard not to pull the trigger on a Brendan Allen moneyline bet in this spot. I think I get it's a tough matchup considering Imavov will have the advantage in the striking, but it's Brendan Allen, and he's proving to be a tough out for everyone lately. 8-fight winning streak. He finds a way to win, which is important when you're up against the top half of the weight class. Brendan has finished 4 out of his last 5 by submission. His ground game is amazing. If he gets you down, he will make it a long night or a quick one if you make a mistake. So I think it's no secret, if he's going to win this fight, he's got to have success in the grappling. Imavov is a great striker. We saw him in his last one against Cannonier, who's a powerful middleweight. Imavov was able to deal with Cannonier's power fairly well. He did fairly well in the striking exchanges. It took a little time for Imavov to build into the fight. He lost the first round on all judges' scorecards, but eventually he found that shot, and there is some controversy because the ref stepped in shortly after, but I felt the fight was trending in his favor. And even if it went to the scorecards, I thought Nasruddin Imavov was starting to come on late. Prior to the Cannonier fight, he was able to make Dolidze look like he just didn't belong there. He stuffed all 4 of Dolidze's takedown attempts. He outstruck Dolidze 112 to 34 in significant strikes. Overall, I've been very impressed with both guys. And Imavov and his growth while he's been a part of the UFC, I think this step up is warranted, but I can't get to a moneyline bet on Nasruddin Imavov in this fight. The value, as I said earlier, is on the dog for sure. If I had to make a pick, though, I think Nasruddin Imavov gets this one done. Imavov, he can strike, but he can also grapple. We've seen him work takedowns in majority of his wins, and I think if he can keep this standing for 2 out of 3 rounds, then he will have done enough to get the job done. If this was 5 rounds, I think the line maybe would be a lot closer, considering Allen can pull off something late, but it's 3 rounds, and I think Imavov will give Allen just enough problems to keep this one standing in the first 2 rounds and get the job done. So give me Nasruddin Imavov by decision in this fight. I don't think he gets a finish. I think this fight goes over 2.5 for sure, and I think we see the judges' scorecards in this fight. I'm leaning Nasruddin Imavov to get this one done. Main event, Renato Moicano taking on Benoit Saint Denis. Amazing main event. Moicano has won 4 out of his last 5 fights, 11-5 in the UFC overall, ranked just 1 spot above Benoit Saint Denis, yet he's the plus 235 underdog in this fight. He just picked up his first knockout of his career in his last one against Jalen Turner, and that doesn't go without saying that he did almost and maybe should have gotten finished in that fight. Jalen Turner, he played with his food, got too cocky, he dropped Moicano bad, and decided to walk away, thinking he had the highlight reel knockout. Moicano found his way back up and worked a knockout finish of his own, man. I thought, I was on the Moicano side that night. I felt like he had to deal with a very dangerous first round, and after that he was going to be live to get the job done. I felt like I was on an island when I made that pick, considering the public was heavy on Jalen Turner that night. But Moicano, 11 wins in the UFC, 6 by submission. I thought he had the ground game to expose Turner that night, but it was a striker versus grappler matchup that night. This fight against Benoit Saint Denis is going to be much harder because Saint Denis, he can grapple. Saint Denis can strike, and he will go out on his shield every time. I've been very impressed with Benoit's grit and his durability. The guy just doesn't mind a war. He will do whatever it takes to win until the cardio is on E. And the fight is 5 rounds, so there's plenty of time for the cardio dump to happen. But keep in mind, Benoit Saint Denis has a 100% finish rate. 9 by submission, 4 by knockout. He's only seen the scorecards once in his career, and it was when he got destroyed against Elizeu Zaleski on short notice in his debut. But if anything, I thought the durability showed itself in that fight, in his debut, considering, it could have been stopped multiple times. But Benoit Saint Denis is game, and he showed us that night he's not out until he's out cold, pretty much, man. And that's what Dustin Poirier was able to do. Dustin Poirier, not a bad loss to have on your record. And from what I've seen, it's the guys who can match Benoit in all areas that are going to cause problems for him. Can Moicano cause enough problems? I'm not so sure, man. Saint Denis is going to welcome the striking exchanges with power. And on the ground, I think he's strong enough to hold his own if it goes there. The durability isn't a question, but if this fight starts going into rounds 3, 4, and 5, we are heading to a territory that Benoit Saint Denis has not been in. So, we're really going to see what Benoit Saint Denis is made of if we start going into the later rounds of this fight. We don't know if Benoit Saint Denis has the pace to can push this pace for 25 minutes. And Moicano, he has shown fairly no issues in the cardio department. So I think the late finish or maybe a decision might favor Moicano in this fight. I respect Moicano way too much to be betting on Benoit Saint Denis at this line. But I can see Benoit Saint Denis getting this one done inside 3 rounds as well. So, he was basically thrown into the fire of this weight class with all the hype behind him, and now he's got to back it up. But I think he's got the right opponent to do that against, and I think Benoit Saint Denis gets this one done, man. I'm picking Benoit Saint Denis inside the distance here. I just think he's gonna be too much early for Renato Moicano. But if he can't get it done by round 3, I can see myself betting Moicano live at a big plus money number to get it done in rounds 3 through 5, because this is unknown territory for Benoit Saint Denis, and we know with his style of fighting, you're going to gas out eventually. So, maybe Moicano can survive once again. Maybe he shows that durability once again. But these fights and this damage is starting to wear on Moicano, and he's starting to drop a lot sooner. Jalen Turner basically had him out of there. But and the guy is 34 years old, Renato Moicano. So age not really working on his side. I think Benoit Saint Denis at home, I think he gets a bounce back win here. And there you guys have it, man. Those are my picks and predictions for UFC Paris. Let me know what you guys think in the comments. Subscribe. Shout out to Pick'em MMA. Might do a breakdown with him for this card later on in this week. But yeah, man, I'm out of here. Hope you guys like. Peace, man.